Well, more than 50 press conferences tallied up today, interviews and media stunts since mid-December by the Prime Minister. Is any of it changing your mind? Joining me now to discuss this, Sky News host, National Affairs Editor at the Daily Telegraph, James Morrow, and columnist and senior writer at the Herald Sun, Patrick Carlines. James, I'll start with you if I can. James, polling has shown consistently now the PM's out of favour with voters. In recent polls, he's been as close as 50-50 with the coalition. Some have actually had the coalition ahead. Shocker of a year last year. We went into Christmas with that detainee crisis, Airbus elbow that was dogging him as well. We know that there is now a confirmed date for that Dunkley by-election, Saturday the 2nd of March. So he's got his skates on. He really needs to claw back ground. He can't afford to lose that by-election. Fair amount of damage control. You can see today with this move on the caucus on Wednesday, the likelihood this afternoon confirmed that stage 3 tax cuts have gone. He's throwing everything at it, isn't he?
Well, he is throwing everything at it, Peter, but what we're seeing here, I think, is something that we've spoken about many times on this program. The fact that Anthony Albanese, his basic modus operandi is very reactive. You know, he doesn't get out ahead of things. He had that problem with The Voice. He had that problem when Hamas attacked Israel. He's had it multiple times throughout his government. And now, again, with cost of living, we're seeing the same thing. It's not like people haven't been saying this for 18 months now, that cost of living was a big concern. And now he's just now calling everybody to get together and say, oh, well, let's have a chat about it. Let's see what we can do. And it sounds like the big upshot from this is going to be a big broken promise. And I think that this is going to be worn very heavily by Labor. And I think particularly it's going to be a problem in some of those teal seats, you know, that voted to get rid of the coalition and now going to wind up very much bearing the brunt of this policy change.
Patrick, we know last week that it was 12 months ago that they looked at the idea of a grocery review. Labor knocked it back. Now under pressure, you know, cost of the tills going up and up and up. People are demanding action. They've been forced to backflip on that. We know with the power bill promise, $2.75 off a power bill, that's a broken promise. We look likely to see something now happen on these tax cuts as well. The issue today out in terms of data is rent. I mean, this is extraordinary. Rents are up 40% in Sydney, it says, 70% in Perth, 45% in Brisbane. By the end of the week, and I'll get to that in a moment with my next guest, 27 million people will live in this country. So all these migrants are coming in, but our housing stock clearly can't keep up.
That's right. I mean, you just got to look at the data, Peter, as you said. I mean, since the start of the pandemic, I think Australian wages have gone up 10% across the board. Rental prices in Sydney and Melbourne are 25-40%. You're going to Woolies and you're going to Coles and you're paying, you know, $2 for a tomato, and you're filling up the car and you're paying more and more. This is a dreadful, this should be front and centre of any Albanese powwow this week, this rental crisis. It hasn't happened overnight. You've got the population growth in areas which is, you know, exacerbating the problem. This is a really big problem because these are people who have nothing to fall back on. I know people who can't afford to stay where they are as renters, but can't afford to move because the rents have gone up so much. This is a really big problem.
James, the PM hit out today. It claims he's bringing back his MPs to Canberra on Wednesday for little more than a media stunt. Now, I call it a stunt because we know there's a likelihood of a cost of living package going to Cabinet tomorrow. He's then got a speech on Thursday. The speech is already written. He knows what's in the speech. So this is just a pick-fack on Wednesday. And when he says, oh, well, it's not going to cost that much money, not $500,000, that's ridiculous. Well, I had a look at air flights today from Perth. A business class seat one way from Perth to Canberra on Wednesday, that's already bigger than $3,000. Just one way. It's $900 one way from Melbourne to Canberra. You add in the travel allowance, the cars, the drivers and all the staff that will come with these MPs. I think $500,000 is perhaps undercooking this cost. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that gets punters angry, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it really does, Peter. And I think there's a really interesting way that we can think about this sort of thing. You know, put it in the context of the broken promise, or what we think might be a broken promise on tax cuts. Now, you just said that $3,000, that was a one-way airfare from Perth to Canberra. Now, there's some chatter that the shift in what higher income earners will receive back from bracket creep is going to go from $9,000 to $6,000. So what you're basically saying is if you're one of those earners, then potentially all $3,000 you've been asked extra to kick in was used to pay for the flight of one MP from Perth to Canberra, not even to get them back again after the barbecue at the lodge. This is the way people need to think about the just ridiculous spending that this and frankly every government does, and say, no, we demand a lot better for our money.
Patrick, I went to the tennis. Terrific on Friday, but they've got a Pride Day, they've got a First Nations Day, they've got a Disabilities Day, but they're not doing anything on Australia Day. And we find out today that Cricket Australia has actually banned the phrase Australia Day on Friday at the Gabba. What do you make of this?
Well, the idea that Australia Day is a dirty word or a dirty term, I think most Australians would sort of stop and say, hang on, what are you doing? It's more controversial. This is more controversial for not recognising Australia Day than it would have been if elements had got upset by greater recognition of the day. I think there was a Roy Morgan poll out today that showed that 68% of Australians think that Australia Day should remain on January 26. And where that's interesting is that's actually up from last year. So if you look at the last 12 months, you look at all the hand-wringing and all the goings-on with the voice and so on, it's almost as if some Australians or a lot of Australians are actually saying, hang on, enough is enough. And they certainly don't want Cricket Australia or Woolworths or any other sort of entity telling them how they should think on their behalf.
James, I'm going to ask you about DeSantis pulling out today out of the US presidential race on the Republican side. But I mean, you and I can't imagine the US Open dumping the US flag on the 4th of July. I'm ashamed that people will watch our big sporting events on our national day and it's basically banned that we can have a flag or have any celebration of the wonderful country we are. But give me a view on that one. But also DeSantis, that was shock news today, wasn't it?
Well, the DeSantis thing wasn't really all that shock news. I mean, we knew that he was drifting in the polls and that his campaign was never going to catch fire. So really it's now down to Trump versus Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley seems to be the sort of the corporatist kind of candidate, almost of a female Mitt Romney. And I don't think she's long for this campaign either. I think every supporter is now swinging around behind Trump. But on the Australia Open and the cricket and Australia Day, I just, I come from America and I'm a proud American and I'm a proud Australian, Peter, and I've traveled around the world as you have. I can't imagine any other country allowing the simple act of a national day of celebration to be run down, whether it's the 4th of July or Bastille Day or some countries' Independence Day, letting people just run it down, this small minority of constant malcontents out there just saying, oh, no, we have to feel bad about absolutely everything that ever happened. Until everything is all resolved, then we can't have a barbecue. I think, come on, people are over it and they voted no to this stuff last year at the referendum too. So I really think all of these boards and corporates are all barking up the wrong tree.
Hey, just a quick comment on reports that Trump has all but ruled out having Nikki Haley, if it comes to this, as his running mate. What's behind that?
Well, look, I mean, if you look at the attacks that he's been delivering against Nikki Haley, they've been that she's pro-open borders, that she's pro, foreign policy interventionism everywhere around the world, that she's basically the corporate big money candidate. And I think that that's where that's all coming from. So there's a bunch of other candidates who are potentially in the mix here, are much more likely. And I'm hearing everybody from Tulsi Gabbard to Tim Scott from South Carolina, all sorts of people, even maybe Vivek. We don't know.
All right, we'll watch this closely. Thank you both for your time.